We're very pleased to be part of the celebration of Yom Ha'atzmaut here on the west side. Even people not from the west side are welcome. Okay, so it's my honor and pleasure to introduce Rabbi Dani Segal. Just very briefly, he is the Rav of Alon, which I'm sure we'll speak about this. It's a yeshuv toward the southern part of Israel, and I'll describe what's happening there. He's also one of the core teachers of Ein Prat, which is an important institution, part of the Mechinot, which is a very important movement in Israel. He's involved on the ground in some of the most interesting stuff that's happening in Israel. He studied at Gush Etzion, at Yeshivat Har Etzion. We had the good fortune, last year he was here with Tikva, and we did a fair amount of teaching here at Drisha, including, there's a lot of work with couples, working with couples, newly married couples. And there are a lot more things to say, but it's better to hear from him than from me. So welcome, and looking forward to hearing what you have to say.
It's a pleasure to be back here again. I really had the privilege and schut of being here last year. It was the highlight of my year here. It was the highlight of my family's year here, and it was very special to be. And I had that same feeling walking into the day that I had the first time I walked into the Lisha, that sometimes I feel if I'm in a good place, I'm not in a good place. And a very warm feeling of a good place is a todah haba. It's a pleasure to be back. I'm coming from very intense days in Israel. I landed on Friday morning. If I fall asleep while I'm talking, don't take it personally. So I came in on Friday and I left Motzei Yom Ha'atzmaut. So it was a week of Yom HaZikaron and a week of Yom Ha'atzmaut. And a week of the Levaya of Mayrav and the Rav Lichtenstein. And a week where many things were, many big, important and meaningful things were happening. And I want to go through some of those things because I think they have a lot to do with what I was invited to talk about the growth, the renewal, the expansion of the world of learning in Israel. There's a great renewal. I know renewal stands for something very specific here. But a great renewal of study of Judaism in Israel, and it's happening in many, many fields. From the intellectual, the beginning in the Batei Midrash, moving down to ritual, the Batei Midrash turning into Batei Tfilah, and communities that do things together, moving down to an educational system, affecting the political system. I can't say that about these elections. We have elections very frequently now in Israel. But 2 years ago when we had elections, I really felt that it even entered the political system. It part of the need or want or quest for a different kind of a Jewish approach really entered the political system. I'm not sure I can say that about the political system now, but I think what's much more important is what is really happening on the ground, and that's what I want to talk about. I think there's amazing things that are happening on the ground. I want to get back to these last few days and tell a bit of experiences the way I went through them, and through that go through a lot of different reasons or things that I think are standing behind this renewal in Judaism in Israel, and then maybe at the end say something about where I think it's going or where I hope it can be going. I'm a son of Olim. I made Aliyah when I was 5 months old. Yeah, I was a very early Zionist. I just felt I needed to go. And the family followed a few months later. Actually, it was a big sacrifice on my point. I was only 5 months old, but America already had the new diapers. And Israel was still in the old diapers that we had to wash. So I think maybe it was more sacrifice on my mom's side, but it was a big sacrifice. But it was 1973, and my parents' tickets, our family's tickets were for the plane, were for Motzei Yom Kippur. We were supposed to go one day after Yom Kippur. And we got to the airport. My parents drove from my grandparents' house in Philadelphia to New York, and they were turned back because the plane was full of soldiers going back, and they said there's no room. So they drove back to Philadelphia, and the next day they came back to New York, and they got the same answer. They did that for 19 days. It was in Philadelphia, came back with all the suitcases, and every day they were turned back because there was no room on the plane. On the last day of the war, it was October 24th, they got to the airport, and they were told there's room on the plane today. If you want to go, you can go. So they got on the plane thinking they were still going to a country at war. On the plane they were told there was a ceasefire. And they landed in Ben Gurion at a totally dark airport, because the airport was darkened. And they were picked up by somebody who wasn't enlisted into the army because he had 6 kids. So he wasn't taken in. So he said, I'm going to take my big car that I have and come to the airport every day and check if there's no Olim and take them wherever they want to go. So this guy met us and took our family to Merkaz Klita in Jerusalem. I tell this story because I'm hoping to meet him one day. I hope if I say this, somebody will say, hey, I know that person, or it's me, or... So if you ever hear about somebody with a big car who used to pick up Olim and take them wherever they want to go, so I'd love to meet him. We tried to find him for my parents' 40th anniversary, but we haven't found him yet.
But it was worth coming to hear this story.
Yeah. So only growing up in a family of Olim in Israel is a real privilege. Going through these days, because you take nothing for granted. And a lot of things that my Israeli friends growing up took for granted, my parents never did, and that passed on to us in a certain way. So my mom can cry if the cashier at the supermarket says Shabbat Shalom. That can happen only in Teaneck and in Israel. So all these little things that happen are very meaningful. One of those moments is the moment between Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. Growing up, we have a family ritual that we would turn the TV on at 7 when the tekes starts, the ceremony of passing between Yom HaZikaron and Yom HaAtzmaut. And about 7:05, one of my parents would start crying. 7:10, the other would join in, and they would cry too till like 9 o'clock. But when the tekes finishes, that's like what we do every year. And we sit in it and we watch the tekes. Sometimes if we don't have time, we cry a different day, and then we just watch a short part. The Deoraita is crying, and it doesn't really matter when they... That moment, I think, is it embodies a lot of Israel's special moment. I think that's the Tfilat Ne'ilah of the Tzionut. That's the special moments. And one of the interesting things is that while they're marching and they're trading flags, then there's music in the background. I always grew up and I just listened to the music because it's a nice song and the soldiers are marching and it goes da 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 da. Don't know who knows the song. Da 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 da. And the soldiers are marching, and I always thought it was a beautiful song. The song is a song written by the melody is Mordechai Zeira, and Mordechai Zev, I think, is the something Zev. I don't remember his name now. He was K'tzin Chinuch Rashi of Tzad, and he wrote a song, K'tzin Chinuch Rashi. If I don't translate, so remind me. He's the head of the Chinuch, of education in the IDF, and he was a composer and he was a writer, and he wrote Anu Nosim Lapidim. The words are in front of you. It's the first song on the daf. And it goes like, and by the way, I didn't say this in the beginning, but instead of breaking at the end for questions, which I'll do, if people have something to say or to ask while I'm speaking, I think it'll get much more interactive and interesting, so you're welcome to do that. Like raising your hand and saying, translate what you're saying in Hebrew or anything like that. Anu nosim lapidim. So these are the words. Anu nosim lapidim beliלות afelim, זורחים השבילים מתחת רגלינו, ומי אשר לב לו עצמה לאור, יישא את עיניו וליבו אלינו לאור ויבוא. We are carrying torches on the dark nights, and the paths are glittering under our feet, and whoever is thirsty for light, you can come and join us. Mi asher lev lo, though someone who has a heart and is looking for the light, join us. But then the pizmon, the chorus goes like this. Nes lo kara lanu, kach shemen lo matzanu, la'emek halachnu, hahara alinu, ma'ayanot orot hagnuzim gilinu. We had no miracles. No miracles occurred to us. We didn't find any pach shemen. We did it all ourselves. Le'emek halachnu, hahar alinu, we climbed the mountain, and we found the hidden springs of light. Ma'ayanot orot agmuzim gilim. And then they say it again. Nes lo kara lanu, no miracles. We didn't find any pach shemen. Basela chatzavnu ad adam, vayihi o. I don't know if you can hear the wordplay in Hebrew. What are the two goals of creation? Vayihi o, God saying vayihi o, and creating Adam. So he turns the creation of Adam to basela chatzavnu ad Adam. He turns Adam into we. Chatzavnu is with the chisel and zeh. We chatzavnu. We chiseled into the zeh ad Adam until we were bleeding already. Vayihi o. In any way possible, this song is saying, it's us. It's nobody else. We can do this ourselves. Nes lo kara lanu, pach shemen lo matzanu. Now, when you're a little kid watching TV, and all you hear is da 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 dum dum da da, then you don't know what the Zionist movement is trying to say by putting this song at their Kodesh HaKodashim, that moment of Ne'ilah. This is what we're singing. We've done it all ourselves. Nes lo kara lanu, pach shemen lo matzanu. And when the soldiers finish marching, then you have a certain amount of people every year lighting the torches, which is always beautiful. They do a wonderful job picking people. Everybody has such a meaningful story. And one of the people lighting this year, and I'm going to start already with the reasons behind, I think, this great movement of renewal in Israel, was a woman named Malka Piotrkowski. I'm sure many of you have heard of her or had the privilege of learning with her. I think the world of Torah learning for women in Israel, at least, owes her a great deal. She was in charge of Midrashet Lindenbaum, of Uriah, and she teaches now at Migdal Oz. We've had the privilege at Ein Prat, at the Midrasha, where she's been teaching with us for a few years. And she was in charge of a Forum Takana she created. And Forum Takana was a forum of rabbis, Rabbanim, Rabbaniot, Anshei Ruach. I don't know how to say all these terms in Hebrew, to try and take care of problems that our tzibur should be dealing with openly and hadn't been. So she has lots of zchuyot in many, many different fields. I'm going to read you what she said in her Tekes Adlakat Masot. אני מלכה פטרקובסקי נדני, it's her, בת פנינה ומרדכי צבי זיכרונם לברכה, דור שני לעוז הרוח היהודית שגבר על הקמים להחליטו, מתכבדת לשים משואה זו של יום העצמאות ה-67 למדינת ישראל. She presents herself, and now why am I lighting this torch? She's saying. She says the first thing is לכבוד בני משפחתי שעיקר כוחי מהם. First on behalf of my family, that I get all my koch from them. And all my women friends, the lamdaniyot, in the past and in the present, בעבר ובהווה, that through their great devotion for Torah, have been a part of this great renewal of learning Torah in Israel. And then she thanks all the women and men studying halacha and trying to deal with the new challenges that halacha is facing today. She ends with the sentence, לכבוד מי שבזכותם דרכיה של התורה נחרות כדרכי נועם בכל נתיבותיה שלום, to all those who we can thank for the Torah being experienced as a Torah of דרכיה דרכי נועם בכל נתיבותיה שלום ולתפארת מדינת ישראל. Those are the words that you use every torchlighter ends with. And I think Malka, to those who know her, she just wrote a halachic book called Mehalechet B'Darka, where she takes a lot of different halachic issues and she deals with them in a very new, innovative, and interesting way. She was attacked a lot. It's not something which is easy to do in Israel. But she represents, if I want to talk, I think of the first and most obvious, so therefore I'm not going to devote a lot of time to it, but the most obvious change in the renewal of the world of Torah learning is that 50% of the population which wasn't part of this learning has joined it over the past 20, 30, and 40 years. And they say that in Drisha, which was, I think, the Koach Halutz, the first force to do this in the Jewish world, here in America, which later on generated that world of learning in Israel. So Malka is one of the representatives of that force behind, or that reason behind the Jewish renewal. In the Levaya, by the way, which was it was half a day long, the Lichtenstein, and I wasn't there for the full day. I went for the Hespedim of all the children, and all 6 children spoke. And Reb Moshe, who's a Rosh Yeshiva now, he got up first and said about 5 sentences as a Rosh Yeshiva, and then he said, "I want to speak as a son." And then 6 children spoke as children, and they all spoke about their Abba. At a certain point, I even wanted to hear a bit about his Torah, because, and so when Rav Meir was speaking about his Abba, so at a certain point he said that his Abba always helped him with everything, and once upon a time, a Chevruta didn't want to study Masechet Nida with him, so they approached Rav Lichtenstein between Mincha and Mariv and said, "Can you tell us for a second what Masechet Nida discusses?" And he said that he started from Daf Bet. I almost said Daf Beis, I've been here 2 days already. He started from Daf Bet and he started going through Sugya after Sugya after Sugya after Sugya, telling me where it began and where it ended and what it discusses. And he said, we stopped it at around Daf Lamed because my friend was already convinced that we should do Masechet Nida. So that was the only word, but the rest of them spoke. And when Esti, his daughter, spoke, so she said, she thanked him in the end for many, many things. She thanked him that she could pull him to all the plays that they put on in Bnei Akiva, and he always came. And in the end, she thanked him for opening the doors to the world of Torah for many, many women. And Esti is saying this is the Rosh Yeshiva in Migdal. And I think there were 2 things that interested me about that. First of all, the opening to women's learning, and I think it's also an example of the effect and how women being part of this world has the fact that also Malka and also Esti can get up there, and how family, for instance, is something. When you give the first 6 Espedim for Rosh Yeshiva are all about the time you devoted to family, I think that's a lot to do to the fact that there's another voice in the world of Torah. And so that's the first voice that I wanted to put on the table, and I think that's one of the major things behind this change. But I want to focus on a few things that are more specific, I think, to Israel now and that are going on within Israeli society. Yeah.
Before you go on, I just want to clarify. So you're saying that not only is the fact that more women are studying Torah, not only is this good for the women, but it's being accepted and encouraged by men as well? Is that what you're saying?
I didn't say accepted and encouraged.
So what was your...
No, it's being accepted and encouraged by many men also. And I think it's also, its influence in the Bet Midrash and beyond the Bet Midrash is more than we can imagine. The language is changing. I taught a story of Agnon on Shabbat. I told a story called Maseh, it's a fable of a goat. Those of you who are nodding, it's because I love that story. And at a certain point, somebody raised their hand and said, hey, there's no women in this story. And I looked at the story and there's no women there. And then I said, you know what? If there were women in the story, it probably would have been a bit of a better story. There's no chemla in the story. There's no compassion. There's a lot of things that are lacking in this. And I think there's a great influence in the Bet Midrash. I want to go to another thing. There's an enormous change. I'll say this before I go into detail. I think the change in Judaism in Israel now on the ground is because everybody's changing. It's because the Bet Midrash is changing because women have entered. I think the Chilonim are changing. I think the Datiim are changing. I think the Datiim L'Shavar, those moving between Chiloni and Dati are changing. I think the acceptance of different groups into society is changing. I want to go through each one of these, but every one of them has a very strong impact on the world of learning. The first I want to talk about the Chilonim that are changing. If you go to the third page for a second, since we're celebrating Yom Ha'atzmaut, I want to read the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence. You can remain seated. I'll be the one standing for Salah. So the first sentence of the Declaration of Independence, it's Friday, Ben Gurion goes through all the politics, they finally decide they're going to say it. And he gets up and he says the following, בארץ ישראל קם העם היהודי, בה עוצבה דמותו הרוחנית, הדתית והמדינית, בה חי חיי קוממיות ממלכתית, בה יצר נכסי תרבות לאומיים וכלל אנושיים, והוריש לעולם כולו את ספר הספרים הנצחי. In English, the land of Israel was the birthplace of the Jewish people. Here their spiritual, religious, and political identity was shaped. Here they first attained to statehood, created cultural values of national universal significance, and gave to the world the eternal book of books. So it starts with the word Be'eretz Yisrael. The first three letters of Bereshit Bara Elohim are the first three letters of Achazat HaAtzmaut. I don't know if he intended that, but I always think it's nice. It starts with a big bet in the beginning. And it's a beautiful opening to Megillat HaAtzmaut. The only problem is it's not true, which is kind of upsetting to start the Declaration of Independence with a lie. But besides that, it's very nice. Be'eretz Yisrael קם העם היהודי. Why am I saying it's not true? Because it's not. Because we're not from Eretz Yisrael. We're for לך לך מארצך ומולדתך ובית אביך, we're ארמי עובד אביו הירד מצרימה. We didn't start here. But for somebody, about 10 years ago, appeared a very interesting article, if you want to look it up, by Asaf Sagiv in Tchelet, Azur it was called in English. Asaf Sagiv, with a bet in the end. Asaf Sagiv wrote about he called it the autochthonians. Is there a word autochthony in English?
It's indigenous.
Did you grow from the land?
Yeah.
Yeah?
It's indigenous.
Lots of words in English come from Hebrew. So the word is autochthony in Hebrew. So autochthony. So the indigenous, what you said, that myth of growing from the land. Why was that so important to say, like the French were born out of France and the Brits were born out of Britain, we were born out of this land. And he discusses why the Tanakh doesn't want to say that, and why the people saying the Declaration of Independence wanted to say that. So he gives a lot of different reasons. I want to focus on one that he doesn't really focus on. Why was it so important for them to say Be'eretz Yisrael Kam Ha'am Yehudi? They wanted to, part of what happened in the beginning of Zionism was, we're from here, we're from nowhere. There's a famous book called U'alach Basadot, written by an author named Moshe Shamir, and a famous opening line. The opening line is Elik Nolad Min Hayam. Elik, the main character of that book. So it says Elik Nolad Min Hayam. Elik was born from the sea. We have no roots anywhere. We're creating a new generation. In the beginning of Zionism, the great machloket was, if to take two characters, Bardichevsky and Echad Micha Goodman, who I have the privilege of teaching with and studying with, he wrote a bit about this, about the fight between Bardichevsky and Echad. Bardichevsky was the voice of saying, let's put everything behind. In one of his articles, Bardichevsky says, we can either be היהודים האחרונים או העברים הראשונים. That's our choice in life. היהודים האחרונים או העברים הראשונים, and Bardichevsky chose. Bardichevsky chose, he wants to be העברי הראשון. We want to come from nowhere. In many ways, I think Bardichevsky saw emancipation in a twofold, or doublefold. One is we have to free ourselves from all the other nations, and the second is we have to free ourselves from the Rabbanim. We have to free ourselves from what Judaism used to be. And if we come to Eretz Yisrael, we'll be freed from Judaism, and we'll be freed from other people controlling us. And we can be free. That's what we want to be, Hebrews in a Hebrew land. Echad Ha'am thought very differently. Echad Ha'am didn't think we were coming here to escape Judaism, he thought we were coming here to save Judaism. We're here to renew Judaism. We're here to approach it in a new way. Not to forget the rabbis, but to mend a lot of things that they've done. To look at it in a new light, to shed new light upon it. Echad Ha'am has a masa called Torah Shebalev, which I think every Orthodox Jew should read. And it's beautiful. He writes about Am HaSefer, and he says once we were Am Sifruti, we were literary people. We had a true live dialogue between us and the book. And now he says we become Am HaSefer. We don't think, we don't feel, we just look to the book. And the book is supposed to tell us what to think and what to feel. Anybody growing up in the Orthodox world can identify with a lot of the things that Echad Ha'am is saying. This is the way we wanted to view Judaism. That's what Echad Ha'am. The sad thing is Berdichevsky won. For many, many years, Berdichevsky won. With the foundation of the State of Israel, the voice was, let's put the past behind us. When the words are frozen, the past is in the past. Nobody here watched Frozen? Just my kids? Okay. It's a very important line in Frozen. We'll get to that later. B'chol mikre, as opposed to the past is in the past. I forgot everything now. So that was Berdichevsky. So that we don't want that anymore. And that, so at the best, people hated religion. At the not the best, they just didn't think about religion. Some of the kibbutzim had a arucha chagigit for Erev Yom Kippur. This is Shai Zarchi, who I also have the privilege of learning with, in the Midrasha of Oranim. He says the first time he walked out, when he started rediscovering his Judaism, he walked out of arucha chagigit for Yom Kippur. They all wore white shirts. They went to the Chadar Ochel, and there was a festive meal for Yom Kippur. And he looked at his father and he said, either we fast or we don't do a festive meal. We have to choose, and he walked out of the Chadar Ochel. And that was it, yeah.
Our Yiddishisten here in Manhattan, the same thing.
It's not a soul tofa'ah, a phenomenon for Israel. And just the vikuach, the machloket between Berdichevsky and Echad Ha'am was very strong, and Berdichevsky won in the beginning. What we've been experiencing over the last 20 or 30 years is Echad Ha'am is coming back. And Echad Ha'am is having a delayed victory. And I think you can explain it this way. Chilonim in the beginning were very afraid of their past owning them. Berdichevsky, growing up in Europe, you have two ways of dealing with your past. You either rebel or you're very traditional. Either the past owns you or you forget your past. And in that win or lose game, Berdichevsky said, I don't want my past to own me. I think Chilonim in Israel are realizing that they can have a relationship with their past without their past owning them. And even more than that, they want to own their past. If I want to bring an example from another extraordinary woman, so I'm sure many of you have seen the video of Ruth Calderon, the last elections, 2 years ago. Next year I'll tell you about the next election and the next election. So when Ruth Calderon, how many of you watched the video? Should I repeat it? Okay. So she has, in her inauguration, is that what you say? Speech, or not exactly inauguration. Well, she was her first speech as a Chavrat Knesset. She speaks about owning her past. So she not only brought a volume of Talmud and taught a beautiful sugya from Ketubot that we just did in the Daf Yomi. It was a daf we could almost skip because everybody had watched Ruth Calderon. We learned this already. So she not only taught beautifully the story of Bahumi, but she got up with the Talmud in the beginning and said, this volume belonged to my grandfather. And she spoke about her wanting to own her past. And I think Israelis today, Chiloni Israelis, and that's one of the big movements, they're a major component in this Tnu'ah movement of renewal, is that they're willing to own their past and not being afraid of their past owning. In the Midrasha where I teach, we have Kabbalat Shabbat on Fridays. And we have it in the yeshuv where we live, and it's overlooking a beautiful view, and it's outside, and there's always singing, and it's a very moving Kabbalat Shabbat. And in the first Kabbalat Shabbat, you can always see 2 or 3 people crying on the side, because it's their first Kabbalat Shabbat they've ever been in their life. And I can already see the faces that I'm going to see 5 minutes later. They're very scared. What does this mean that I had a meaningful experience in Kabbalat Shabbat? Because, it's going to own me again. But people are willing to get past that now. Say, okay, that was a nice, meaningful Kabbalat Shabbat. I can dive in. Nothing happened to me. Spirituality can be part of my life. I can relate to these texts. and it doesn't mean I have to change who I am, and it doesn't mean and it's not threatening. So that's one of the major things that is happening, and Echad Ha'am is winning again, and I think that's that's an important thing which is happening. I'm going to move on to a third one after we did the role of women and the role of Chilonim in this great revolution. And I'm really encouraging you, if you have questions or comments on, because I'm going to go through a few, so you're welcome to say or to comment or to ask, to give me time to drink my coffee or to anything. So, the third is I want to speak for a second about Hatikva. It's on the first page, source number 3. One of the nicer things about the Jewish bookshelf is the dialogue that goes on all the time between. That every text relates to other texts, and that no text is whole on its own. And it always gains more meaning from the conversation that it has with other texts. And anybody who went to shul this week, I was punished, by the way, for coming to America. I did 2 Tazriya Metzora straight. It sounds like a Yiddish curse. You read Tazriya Metzora twice. And I missed my Bar Mitzvah Parsha, which is Kedoshi, so I don't know what I'm going to do. I either have to stay another week or read it on the plane. But like whoever read the Haftorah this week, it's so nice. Now, the portion is about the Metzora and being sent out of camp. And then the Haftorah is about those being sent out of camp being able to see what those who were inside the camp couldn't see. And suddenly the Haftorah reverses the whole way you look at the Metzora. It's not us inside and he's the misken outside. Those who were willing to exit the walls save the people who were stuck inside the walls and couldn't see what's going on outside. And then in the 20th century, Rachel, the poet, will write a beautiful poem called Yom Besorah, which is the term used in the Haftorah, Yom Besorah. And she'll write about the argument taking place in Zionism at that time, if we want to get things done, or we want things to be done the right way, the right and proper way. And she ends with the line, Lo oveh shmoa besorah im mipi metzora tavo. I'll say it again. Lo oveh shmoa besorah im mipi metzora tavo. I don't want to hear the blessing, the besorah, if it's coming from a metzora. So she takes the story and she reverses it again. And I found in an internet site called Bikurim for young Israeli poets, somebody who wrote a song answering Rachel, called Yom Besorah also, about how she does want to listen to the Metzora Yuna. So one of the nice things is this conversation going on. Hatikva, which is the national anthem, has such a nice conversation with Chazon Atzamot Yeveshot. So in chapter 37 of Yechezkel, when he's standing there and the Bika is full of the dry bones, and the Kadosh Baruch Hu says to him, Atichiyana Atzamot Eil, and he says, Hashem Elohim, Atah Yadata, I don't know. And then they come alive, and then they Bo Yaruach, and the wind comes. And then the bones are saying one to each other, there's no real hope. There's no real chance. We're never going to live again. And they say, Avdat tikvatenu, nigzarnu lanu. Avdat tikvatenu. And then Naftali Herzimler will take Avdat tikvatenu and say, no, Od lo Avdat tikvatenu. So he'll take that story and he'll renew the story and have a conversation with it. And then he creates this beautiful song called Hatikva, and that turns into the national anthem. Esther Shkalim is a poet. She's the one right next to it. She wrote her own Hatikva. And she was born in 58, I think. And she was born in Iran. And she's a poet, and she's a fighter for women's rights in Israel, and she's a fighter for rights of Mizrahim. And she writes her criticism about Hatikva, and she's saying, hey, my parents never said, we were in the Mizrach. We dive into the Ma'arav. And your Hatikva relates to people looking at Eretz Israel from a very specific perspective. I'm not there. I'll read the first verse of her Hatikva. אבותיי לא התפללו לפאתי מזרח קדימה. משושן צפו ימה, אל השמש העולה בציון. ועלו, וטיפסו בחוף מערב, ותהו בסוף מערב, ותראו בסוף מערב, ותעו. ואני בכותל מזרח אשר במערב קדימה, חדש ימינו כקדם אפלה. Saying, my parents never said לפאתי מזרח קדימה, they looked to the west. And they came and they climbed to the shores on the west. And ta'u and tahu and tahu, they were mistaken, they were bewildered. They didn't know, they were searching because they didn't find what they had been looking for. Because they weren't accepted for who they were. ואני בכותל מזרח, I'm still in the מזרח. קדימה, and I'm praying חדש ימינו כקדם, and she uses כקדם in a double meaning. Also as it was once, and also kedem as mizrach. There's been a very interesting, meaningful revival of a Mizrahi voice in Israel. There's a Beit Midrash called Mizrach Shemesh, which has done wonders. They're sending out now something called the Chacham Yomi. One of the Chachmei Mizrach every day, we're sending out now something on the internet, 365 days a year. All these Rabbanim that we didn't know about, or that they came to Israel, we knew a bit about them, but the hegemonia is, yeah, Ashkenazi didn't let them, until the Rav Ovadia Yosef was willing to speak up for the voice of the different psika, of the different voice of the Halacha Mizrachit. And my brother-in-law's brother wrote his doctorate about Rav Masas. Rav Masas wrote a famous shut called Shut Mayim Chaim. He was one of the Gdolim of Morocco. The family came, and one of them was Rav Rashi of Yerushalayim, and another was Rav Rashi of Haifa. And he wrote his doctorate about Rav Masas because one of the tshuvot of the Rav Masas is you can turn lights on Yom Tov. Yeah. Because you can use Esh on Yom Tov. And that's what? What?
But you can't turn them off.
But you can turn them on. And so you can turn the light on Yom Tov. Most of the Chachamim in Morocco, that's what they did. That's what they did in my brother-in-law's house when they were growing up in Yerucham. They turned the lights on Yom Tov. And he got to yeshiva as a 15-year-old. This is the first time he left home. And it was Rosh Hashanah. And he went and he turned the light on. And he was screamed at and kicked out of yeshiva. And went home to his Abba and said, Abba, can you turn lights on Shabbos? And he said, of course you can. No, there's also a Rabbanim that say you can do it on Yom Tov. And he said, of course you can. And he went and he came back with his shoot of Rav Masas saying that you can do it. But nobody. So when he grew up, he wrote his doctorate about Rav Masas. But this is a voice.
Let him back in yeshiva.
Was it?
They let him back in yeshiva. They did.
Yeah.
Wow.
They let him back in yeshiva. By the way, the Rav Bedi, I don't know if you ever heard, he has a very similar story. He wrote his doctorate about Rav Ovadia Yosef. And he starts, and I never realized this till I heard them both. He starts by an experience he had in yeshiva, that he went in as a child, and he brushed his teeth on Shabbos with mishkat shinayim, not with, and he was also screamed at by the madrich that you can't use toothpaste on Shabbat, you need to use the yeah. And he said he went into the Beit Midrash. This is how he tells the story. It sounds too good to be true. And he didn't know what to do, and he was so upset, he took out a book. The book was Yabi Omer, one of the shutim of the Rav Ovadia, and he opened the book in the tshuva where the Rav Ovadia says that you can use toothpaste on Shabbos. And he later on wrote his, but there's, yeah.
Since we're also speaking of political issues, Yossi Klein Halevi, I saw in the video of his talk at APEC, he makes this very argument. Now that Israel is a majority Israeli country, we are an indigenous people. We simply move from one part of the Middle East to another. It's a very important argument.
I never thought of that one.
Because the Holocaust argument, Ahmadinejad said, look, let Germany build a homeland with them. It's extremely important that we're not second-class citizens and now we're not so patronizing. This is a core of being in Israel.
I never thought of that, the political aspect of what I'm saying. Speaking now of the Jewish renewal aspect, the Mizrahim have a different voice. The paradigm that I was talking about before of two ways to look at tradition is very alien to the way of thinking that Mizrahim bring. It's not that you can either rebel against tradition or that it owns you. Meir Buzaglo is one of the more famous speakers of the new Mizrahi voice in Israel. He has a book called Mesir Safal Ne'emanim, or Safal Ne'emanim, and he talks about the term Ne'emanut, loyalty. He says this is the way we look at tradition. It doesn't own me, it doesn't force me. Loyalty as opposed to samchut, as opposed to authority. We're stuck in authority as opposed to autonomy. He said there's a third way between authority and autonomy. There's loyalty. Nobody's authoritative. We're not going to tell you what to do. And you're not going to be that autonomous. I don't want to listen to you. I'm just going to decide by myself. You have something called loyalty. It has a lot of kavod and respect. And loyalty is part of the family and part of the tribe. And you love it. And you enjoy doing it. And it's part of who you are. These are the people I grew up with. I was the only Ashkenazi kid in class. Everybody did Kiddush at home. Most of the people went to see Beitar in the morning, Beitar Yerushalayim. We either drove or walked to see the soccer game. Nobody smoked. Everybody watched television. There was do's and don'ts of a whole society which was ne'emana. They had loyalty. They had love for their tradition. My father-in-law, they're not religious, but this is over the past 10 years. But when we got married, we would go and they'd be sitting and watching television on Shabbat. And I remember him standing, Motzei Shabbat, with a cigarette in his mouth, looking for the third star. Why? Because it says, Lo tevavu esh bechol mashvotechem b'yom HaShabbat. I don't know if they say it's lechalek yatzat or lelav yatzat. I don't know, but they don't turn fire. You don't fire on Shabbat. That's something we don't do. Our tribe doesn't do that. It has nothing to do with the halacha and the authority. It's pashut ne'emanut. And that voice is being sounded more and more in Israel. So if you're looking for another one of the major reasons why Torah and Torah study and love for Judaism and the Batei Midrash that is springing up everywhere. And I didn't say this enough with Echad Am and Bardishevsky. This renewal is everywhere. Anybody wanting to do something which will be popular, it has to be Jewish. Singers are either putting melodies to psukim, or singing piyutim, or quoting, or chozering b'tshuva. Chozering is not an English word, nachon? But anything which is happening, the plays, the shows, the music, the movies, the TV shows, everything, there's a very, very strong revival. And all these voices are a strong part of it. The women's voice that I started with, and the different Chiloni voice, and the Mizrahi voice. The Mizrahi voice is, by the way, a good example of, I think, many voices that were played down as part of the kol hituch, as part of the big melting pot, part of the big melting pot. So voices weren't allowed to have their real own voice. So the Mizrahi voice was played down. And other Jewish voices are also acting very differently. Even if I take, for example, like the conservative and reform movement in Israel, which for a long time their voice was just a clash with the establishment. You're not letting us do this, you're not letting us do this, we want to be part of it. That has kind of stopped, not because the establishment has changed, because people are putting that on the side. That's the establishment. Things are just happening. So they have this whole movement now of bar mitzvahs and weddings and things and Batei Knesset that are thriving and that are growing because more and more people are saying, this is my Judaism and I want to celebrate my Judaism. And this is Mizrahi Judaism, this is Maravi Judaism, this is Reform Judaism, this is Orthodox Judaism. But people have much more of a voice. The field is open for many more people to voice their. Yeah.
It seems for this to be successful, it seems that the Rabbanut HaRashit has to be totally ignored. Or am I wrong? Are they also accepting this type of diversity?
They're not totally ignored. There's a famous line in Princess Bride. There's a big difference between mostly dead and all dead. But I would say they're mostly ignored by a lot of people. I'm not saying this not go with happiness. I would love for a different Rabbanut Rashit to be there and to be much more accepted and much more loved.
It almost seems like this is a reaction against them.
A lot of it is against. I do a lot of weddings in Israel, and I'm approached by more and more couples, dati and non-dati, saying we want a fully halachic wedding, we just don't want to do it through the Rabbanut. Which I can't do, by the way, according to law in Israel. And I always have my questions also about it, because I'm still on the side that we want to see a different Rabbanut and wants to keep something central, but it's not different at the moment, and things are just happening. Yeah, you're right, they're just happening. Yeah.
Well, I think one of the greatest challenges along those lines is how to encourage and facilitate a mutual respect between the different groups who, say the more Dati group, are seeing a renewal of sometimes Jewish spirit in the Filoni sector or a difference in the Mizrach sector. How do you foster a sense of respect and a sense of acceptance?
But what we've lost, and you have to say that also, with the melting pot, you have good things and bad things. You've lost some core saying, this is what we're all doing. I don't think it was good for us anymore. I think it's good that we lost it, but building that mutual respect is another way of saying, okay, we're doing different things, but we can still be together in a certain way. And I'll continue here.
I was a student at Asia Torah at one point in Macon Pardes, so I know like there are yeshivas that cater to beginners. And I was just wondering what's new in that space.
Okay, so I'm going to get to that now in a second. That's also the place where I teach. And I just want to say what we've done, and I don't think we're going to get to everything, so what we might do. And I think there's a lot of reasons behind this renewal. I said about women, I said about the Chiloni voice changing, and about the Mizrahi voice. I think orthodoxy has changed. I think, you know the term daklash?
No.
Yeah? Daklash means dati l'she'avar, those who used to be Orthodox. There's also daklash lash, because they've moved and they've come back, so there's she'avar l'she'avar, there's daklash lash lash, and there's but those also have a lot of effect. I'll say them very shortly. First of all, people leaving religion. I think you have more people leaving but still loving. You don't have people only walking out and slamming the door. You have people leaving, still being very, very connected with a lot of knowledge, which they bring into this world of renewal, and looking at it in a different way. What I wanted to bring as an example, if you'll see number 4, is Yehuda Amichai. I'll do this very quickly. Yehuda Amichai is a good example within his lifetime of being one who was very vocal as a voice against the old kind of leaving with no loving, leaving and slamming the door, as opposed to in the end of his life where he writes very, very different. In the beginning of his life, he's very famous for a song called El Maleh Rachamim. Don't know how many of you are familiar with that song. You're familiar with El Maleh Rachamim, I'm sure. But he wrote a poem about El Maleh Rachamim, saying the following: Ilmaleh El Maleh Rachamim, hayu harachamim ba'olam velo rak bo.
Wow.
Say it again. Ilmaleh ha'el maleh rachamim, hayu harachamim ba'olam velo rak bo. He takes El Maleh Rachamim, the most loving, compassionate prayer in Judaism, and turns it into a call against God. He turns El Maleh to Il Maleh. If not, God were so full of mercy, maybe there would have been some mercy left for our world. And the continuation of the poem is a whole thing against the Kadosh Baruch Hu. That's Yehuda Amichai. He has a lot of them. He has a song called Vehiti Ilatecha. How many of you say Vehiti Ilatecha on Rosh Hashanah? Is it a piyut that you say here? Vehiti Ilatecha? Yeah. So that how great the Kadosh Baruch Hu is. We're such nothings, and he has a poem called Vehiti Ilatecha saying the exact opposite. Like, you have to be Yehuda Amichai to do this. In his last book, which I put here somewhere, פתוח סגור פתוח. Beautiful, beautiful book. He writes it in 2001. He passes away in 2002. This is like a poetic autobiography. It's his life through poem. And it writes from a very different place already. And he's speaking about being part of both worlds. He has a poem beginning with the words, Ani Adam Kasher. He's trying to convince us. And then he says, Lama Ani Adam Kasher? Ki Ani Ma'ale Gira. Because I'm bringing up things from the past. And I'm Shoseh Hashes, I have one foot here and one foot here. And he goes through how he's trying to say, I'm kosher. And he has beautiful, beautiful poems. And one of them relating to why he was always anti. So this is poem number 4. For source, I'll read it in Hebrew first. אני מוכרח תמיד ללכת בכיוון נגדי לכל שעובר ועבר. כך אני חש שאני חי בירושלים. אני הולך נגד תהלוכות הצליינים בעיר העתיקה. אני מתחכך בהם, משתפשף, חש את ערג בגדיהם, ומריח את ריחם ושומע את דיבוריהם וזמרתם. הם מופיעים ליד לחיי כמו עננים יפים. לפעמים אני מסתבך בקהל המלווים של מת, ויוצא בקצה השני בכיוון החיים הטובים. ולפעמים אני שבוי בתוך מצעדי שמחה ומרים יד, כמו שחיין נגד הזרם, כאומר שלום, שלום, לכו, לכו לכם. ואני לצד השני לבלי ומנוחתי. אני הולך נגד הגעגועים ונגד התפילות, כדי לחוש את נשמתם החמה על פניי, ואת זמזום ורשרוש חורבי הגעגועים והתפילה. וכך אולי נוצרת דת חדשה, כמו אש מגפרור משתפשף, וכמו החיכוך שעושה חשמל. I'll read part of it at least in English. I must always walk in the opposite direction to all that is and has been, so I feel that I live in Jerusalem. I walk opposite, and now he goes through all these things that he's walking opposite. Why is he always walking in the wrong direction? Why is everybody saying one thing? Why does he have to say the other? And I'm skipping to like 6 lines before the end. I walk opposed to the longing and prayers so that I may feel their warm breath on my face and the buzz and rustling of the substance of prayer and longing. And so maybe a new religion is created, like fire from a rubbed match and friction that causes electricity. Amichai, in trying to explain why he's walking in the opposite direction, is actually quoting the Mishnah of people walking in the opposite direction. A Mishnah that appears in Masechet Midot. This is sources number 5 and 6. Reading in the English, all who entered the Temple Mount entered by the right and went around to the right and went out by the left. Everybody came from the south, came from Ir David, went through Sha'arei Huldah, came in from the south, came up onto the Temple Mount and entered. It was like on Keshet Robinson, the first interchange in history. They're all walking in the same direction except somebody walking in the opposite. Why did people walk in the opposite? Save for one to whom something untoward had happened. It's either somebody who's Avel or somebody who's in Chere. And then he's walking and thousands of people are walking against him. He's probably bumping into them and they're saying, why are you walking in the wrong direction? So he says, because I'm an Avel. So they say, Ashochem b'makom hazeh yenachemcha. You'll get nechama from... Or he says, I'm in Chere. So they say, Ashochem b'bayit hazeh yiten belev chavercha v'yikavucha. You won't be in Chere anymore. People will talk to you again. So what is Yehuda Amichai saying? You want to know why I've been walking in the opposite direction all the time? And he quotes this Mishnah, look, 6 lines from the end in the Hebrew. Ani latzad hasheni levli v'menuchati. He wants to make sure we know what Mishnah is talking about. I'm going to my Eved and to my Menucha. Why? Why am I walking? Because I want to feel the warm breath on my face. I'm not leaving and not loving. I'm leaving and I love this very much. And I want to be part of it. But I want to be part of it in a different way. So this renewal is happening for so many reasons. Because we have people who have knowledge and have a lot of love, but want to see things a bit differently. We have people who have no knowledge and want to have no part of this world, who want to re-own this world and want to be part of it. Within the world of people studying, we have 50% of the population returning with a new voice. The women's voice coming into the Bet Midrash. We have another 50 or 51% of the population with a different voice, a Mizrahi voice, coming and entering the dialogue with a different voice of their own. Other powers have a lot to do with this also. There's a lot of changes within the Orthodox world. I didn't get to them enough. the entrance of Chassidut, of Torah that should speak to me in a different way. Well, Rav Segal brought into yeshivas, you can't give a shiur today in Israel without a Sfat Emet or a Mea Shilach. If you don't say the words Aveira Leshma 3 times, then it's not a shiur. And walk around with a little book of Reb Tzadok. That's and what does it mean to you? And where's Torah meeting you? That in the whole world of yeshivot, of Torah study, that's a new voice. That's a new voice, by the way, which was brought in also with the meeting of Chiloni Dati and the Mechinot and people starting to learn differently and asking, okay, what does it mean to me? And if people were asking that, and other people started asking that question. So everything is entered together, and American Jewry has a very big role in what's going on. Because not only did all the organizations that had to do with Jewish renewal in Israel founded by Olim, or people who came from here, founded and funded many times, but also I came here with a group earlier this year, went to New York, to California, and mostly Chiloni. For any Israeli meeting what's going on in American Jewry, they're so inspired. They're inspired by a Judaism who has to define itself in a area or sviva, which is asking questions or saying something else or posing a threat to it, or people needing to put a lat into remaining Jewish meaningfully. And I went back with a group of 15 Chilonim, so inspired about their Judaism. And I think the dialogue which is being created today, we went to an amazing school there. And a school that you can't see in Israel. The school there in Los Angeles, something school. That's what I remember. It had the word Jewish, the new Jewish high school. An amazing school. We had a morning there, and we were with our mouths open the whole. I had this experience with my kids at SCR. You don't, and so some of the Israelis in the group were saying, it's easy. You pay $30,000 a year. This is the education you're going to get. So they were saying that till the end when we met with the principal and with a few of the parents. And they were talking about how amazing the school is. And one of the people asked, is there any downside to this? So one after the other, the 4 parents that were there, including the principal, all said, well, there is. We've changed our whole lifestyle for this. To put our kids in this school, we've prioritized differently. There's things we put aside. We didn't move into the new house. The principal of the school, which has 6 kids, is an amazing person. And he's in a big job there, the principal of the school. He said, I've had the same car for 20 years because I want all my kids to go to Jewish. And then the people who were snorting kind of in the group and saying, we're amazed at somebody who's willing to change their whole lifestyle because something in their Jewish identity is so important to them and they're going to change their whole life around for them. So for people to meet that was very important. So that's also a major component in what is going on in Israel, this dialogue and what's happening in American Jewry. All these things are... So there's a lot of reasons for what's going on, and things that are going on are beautiful. I want to just share one thing which has been going on. One or 2 things that are going on. One of the amazing things that I came from over these past few days is we celebrated Aseret Yemei Todah. In the Midrasha where I teach, which I'll say one word about, I live in the yeshuv, like Rabbi Segal was saying, which is a mixed yeshuv of Datim and Chiloni. Within that yeshuv, there's a learning program for pre-army students and post-army students, for Chilonim and Datim. They come to study together, either for a year, or for 4 months, or for 1 month. We have different programs. But they're sitting and they're studying Yadut, and they're studying philosophy, and they're studying literature, and they're studying Tzionut. And the post-army program, which has been going for 10 years, we have over 1,000 alumni. And they've created houses of study and prayer and social action in Tel Aviv and in Beersheba and in Jerusalem. And they meet once or twice or 3 times a week. And they had a Tfilat Yom Ha'atzmaut this week with 400 people. Mostly Chiloni, who came to Tfilat Yom Ha'atzmaut because it's important to celebrate Yom Ha'atzmaut and to have structure and meaning and ritual as part of that day. And this was the end of Aseret Yemei Todah. Seit Yemei Todah we've been running for 4 years now. The days between Yom HaShoah and Yom HaAtzmaut. And trying to reinstitute the term of Todah. Of course, taking from a Seit Yemei Tshuva. And it's a very nice example of using tradition and renewing tradition in a fashion or catering to a need that we think is there in Israeli society. And we had a big event for Seit Yemei Todah in every one of these cities. There was always learning and studying and singing. And the logo of Seit Yemei Todah is on the first page. We had, by the way, billboards up in 12 different cities in Tachana Merkazit, like in a big place. We put up billboards, and the billboard said, Ani Modeh Al, and there was a box of chalks, and you went in, you wrote your thanks. And we had sending thanks by mail and different thanks video, but there was this big thing in Tachana Merkazit Yerushalayim, and I should send you a small video of just seeing the people passing by, young, old, soldiers, taking a chalk from the box and writing Ani Modeh Le'imah Sheli, Ani Modeh Le'zeh, Ani Modeh Le'zeh. So we had one in our yeshuv, and it was right outside the gan. And the kids in the gan would come out every day and erase all the other todot and right there to bring the toda'ah of todah, or attitude of gratitude. It works in both languages. Back to be part of the siach, part of the conversation. I'll share with you one thing that I taught and one thing that Micha taught at Seit Yemei Todah. Yeah.
What about the public schools in the governments? They don't teach Jewish history. They don't teach any religion. What are they, is there a change in that? I know it's the kids don't know Jewish history. And we learn American history.
So I'll say one word about the school. I said this whole Jewish renewal, it started at intellectual, it moved into ritual. One of the nice things is it's moving into the schools big time over the past few years. Less government funded, although the government also had a big program that Limor did not started called the Todat Israel, I think. But programs like Be'eri or Tali or a lot of organizations, I'm saying a lot of the nice things are happening on the ground. Not necessarily government funded, but more and more schools are being approached by programs bringing much more Yadut and Jewish history into it. And also the system itself, I think, is advancing slowly. Yeah.
What about the Haredi Yeshiva world, not the Hasidim?
The Haredi Yeshiva world, I don't think is a great part of what is happening here. I think two things. One, I don't know it enough. On the plane here, I had to choose which channel I'm watching on the little TV. So because my last trip I traveled with 300 Hasidei Bogov on the plane that were coming to Israel, they all got this note from the Rebbe that you put on the little TV. It came with a little piece of Scotch tape and it said like Bitul Torah on it, and they all put it on the little TVs on the. So I didn't want to watch TV because I remembered that. So I looked at Arutz. There's Arutz Yadut. On Yalad, so it was all videos, video clips of songs, of Dossi songs. And I was amazed at what's going on in the Haredi world, these video clips. And I'm just saying there's things going on there that I couldn't imagine. And I think there's a lot going on in our world. And unfortunately, I think I don't know enough. But it's really less part of this. And the two things I wanted to share with you about today, and I'll try and start closing soon. I taught a shoot. There's a beautiful book, Sefer Shelot V'Tshuvot. It's called Negishut Lamakom. And I didn't bring the book because I didn't want to carry too much. It's a small book. It has a picture of a wheelchair driving up to the sky. It's written by Shaulin Bari. Shaulin Bari is a rabbi who got his smicha in Ma'ale Gilboa. He's handicapped from birth. He's in a wheelchair. And the whole book of Shelot V'Tshuvot is about people who are challenged with different things. and how should halacha treat, and there's about a blind man reading the Torah and a deaf person, and different, and he starts out with a beautiful tshuva. He writes it as if he was asked the question, and he's giving the tshuva. Very soon you realize that he's writing about himself. So the question that somebody Ki'ilu asked him was, I drowned in my mother's womb in water, and I almost was suffocated. And at the last moment, my life was saved, but I was paralyzed for life. And then he has two questions. One, may I or am I obliged to say agomet? And does the fact that so many years have passed, can I still say agomet? Now, in a question, he does a reframing for your mind. That's the attitude of gratitude. Toda'ah of todah. He says, I know the way you're looking at me. You're saying, oh, misken, zeh. I'm looking at myself as somebody who wants to say agomet. And to have an attitude to that, to look through that lens into the world, can do a lot, I think, also for Yadut and also for Tzionut. I'll mention both in a second. By the way, that's another thing. Part of this renewal, there's so many nice connections between Jewish learning and social action. You know, it's happening here so much, and it's happening in Israel a lot. Things like Ma'aglei Tzedek or Atava Chevrati, or religious groups fighting for social rights. And that being part of your religious character is also a great part. Negishut Min HaShamayim, this book is just part of that phenomenon. Micha talked, by the way, about the attitude of gratitude, again about this declaration of independence, about Be'etz Yisrael Kama Am HaYehudi. And he mentioned another passage that I had the privilege of studying with Rabbi Silber about Arami Oved Avi, and he wrote about in the Haggadah. When we tell our story, we also don't tell the exact story. We don't say anything about the Avot in Arami Oved Avi. We just go to Yaakov and Arami Oved Avi Vayeret Mitzrayim. Why? Because we want to tell the story of a nation. They weren't a nation yet, so we put that aside. But what's so nice is when you tell the story, you become thankful. Arami Oved Avi Vayeret Mitzrayim Vayaru Sham Im Tei Me'at. You went through so much. ועתה הנה הבאתי את ראשית פרי אדמה, I have my own land, I have crops, I can bring them here, ושמחת בכל הטוב. Now I'm happy. The problem with saying בארץ ישראל כמה העם היהודי is you don't have תודה, you don't have thankfulness. You think you own the land, you think it's yours, you think it belongs to you. You don't have the לך לך, you don't have כי גרים הייתם בארץ מצרים. תודה is something which could help Zionism a lot and could help Judaism a lot in many, many ways. And just saying, experiencing these Aseret Yemei Todah was such a nice example for me for what these mechinot and batei midrash and houses of study can change, can bring a new wind, can bring a new voice. The first group I studied with, we did a siyum. We studied Masechet Makot. 8 chevre, 8 guys and girls, none of them dati. They came for half a year, studied Gemara every day, and we finished Masechet Makot. They said, what do we do for the end? I said, we do a siyum. They said, what's a siyum? I showed them what a siyum is. They looked at the siyum, they said, we can't say this. And I said, why can't you say it? Because he says, מודים אנחנו לך ששמת חלקים יושבי בית המדרש ולא שמת חלקים יושבי קרנות. I'm happy for being here, not being with all those riffraff sitting outside. Why? שאנו רצים והם רצים. We run and do good things and they run and do terrible things. So they said, we want to write our own siyum. And they wrote their own siyum. And it said, מודים אנחנו לך ששמת חלקנו מיושבי בית המדרש מבלי שתעלים עינינו מיושבי קרנות. Thank you for allowing us to sit in the Beit Midrash and still have our eyes open to people sitting in other places. That was their siyum. But that couldn't happen till the 8 people who never opened the Daf Gemara in their life wrote their own siyum or finished their first Masechet. And so these things are happening all the time. Am I overboard with my time? Should I come 5 minutes? I'm going to say 2 positive things that I think can come from this. Okay? One is I brought in, I won't study. I brought something from Bialik. Bialik was a lot part of this amazing movement. And Bialik wrote something about Halakha and Agadah. how every halacha has a beautiful idea behind it, but how every beautiful idea has no way to live in this world if it doesn't have a halacha that comes with it. I think one of the wonderful presents of this renewal is that we're selling halacha to people who don't have halacha, and we're selling agadah to people who are lacking agadah in their lives. And so many people are getting a component of a full spiritual Jewish life that maybe has been missing for you. And on the ground, wonderful, beautiful things are happening. In the schools, in the high schools, in the pre-army programs, in the post-army programs, in the kehilot that are coming, in the batei midrash that are growing. And it really, like the political movement can choose to join the club or not. They'll follow or they won't follow, but they're not even controlling it anymore. There's so many things that are happening. It'll be nice if they join in. It'll be a bit easier, and there'll be some more money, and there'll be more. But it might even lose the fighting against the establishment. So it's good that it's happening this way. Those are the halacha and agadah. I just want to end with Shir HaMa'alot. Not that we ate a full meal, but source number 10 is Shir HaMa'alot B'Shuv Hashem Shivat Zion Haynu Kecholmim. I mentioned Atikva. By the way, this was another contendant for the hymnon. It didn't make it in the end. It came in second place. A very justifiable second place. It's a beautiful idea for hymnon. B'Shuv Hashem Shivat Zion Haynu Kecholmim. We're like dreamers. And Shuva Hashem et Shevitenu Ka'afikim B'Negev. We had a lot of rains in Israel this summer. There were a lot of shitfonot in Midbar Yehuda where I live, and in the Negev where my sister lives. And my sister always makes fun of me because Afikim B'Negev, like when we have a shitafon, how do you say a flash flood? It's like, it's amazing. It's 2 or 3 meters wide, a lot of water is gushing through the wadi. And then she sends me these pictures of Nachal Tzelim, 3 kilometers wide. And we say to the Kadosh Baruch Hu, Shuva Hashem et Shevitenu Ka'afikim B'Negev. This is the way we want to return. Gadol, Rachav, Maleh. Hazorim B'dima B'rinai Yitzoru. I want to relate to the term Haynu Kecholmim. Say 3 things about that, and I'll finish. Haynu Kecholmim can be interpreted in many different ways. The Ibn Ezra, the Radak, another Parshan, they have 3 different interpretations. One is Haynu Kecholmim. When we finally return, the Galut will seem like a distant dream. The other is that when we return, it'll be like a good dream. This will be something new. The third interpretation, the Rav Drukman wrote a whole article about this Haynu Kecholmim. He says, Haynu Kecholmim can be like when you're in class and you're not listening, and the teacher comes and says, what, are you dreaming? Like you're present in a situation, but you're not really present. I have a friend who asked me, and he asks all his friends, where were you when you got married? Which is a beautiful question, because as somebody who stands under the chuppah with a lot of couples, a lot of them aren't there. It's a nice question. Where were you? Were you thinking about the cup that you need to break? Were you thinking, did you invite this guy? Where were you? Where were you when this big thing happened? Haynu Kecholmim, it's happening, and we're not there. Rabbi Segal was saying about the privilege of studying with your Bawan, but not knowing at the time what kind of a gadol he is. That can happen many times in life. You're experiencing something extraordinary, but you don't know it at the time. The midrashim I brought here are about, 11 is about a midrash about people walking in Yam Suf and complaining to each other about the ground being muddy. And one is saying, ugh, in Egypt the ground was muddy, here the ground was muddy, nothing changed. You're walking in the midst of the most amazing miracle, but you can't see it. And Yehuda Amichai, who I brought before, this is his final poem, מרחוק כל דבר נראה נס, אבל מקרוב גם נס לא נראה כך. אפילו מי שעבר בים סוף בבקיעת הים, even those walking through, what did they see? ראה רק את הגב המזיע של ההולך לפניו. You don't realize you're in the midst of a miracle. I feel we're in the midst of a miracle. We're in the midst of very, very, very special times. And when my kids ask me, where were you when this whole Tnuah, when this whole great movement of renewal, when people wanted to do things differently, when all these things were happening, where were you? I want to tell them, I wasn't dreaming, I was there, I was part of it. I'll just end with my Savta Rabba. I mentioned my mother coming on Aliyah. She went to her grandmother to tell her they're going to Israel. And my great-grandmother only spoke Yiddish. And my Ima told her we're going to Eretz Yisrael. And she was sure that my mom was pulling her leg because nobody really goes to Eretz Yisrael. And she was saying, I'm an old lady, why are you kidding me? And she said to her, Lach, mein Kind. I think I'm saying that right?
Yeah.
Someday we'll all go to Eretz Yisrael. Like it was a dream. It wasn't really true. And we're in not a dream coming true, because there's still a long way to go, but a lot of potential of a dream coming true. A dream which is starting to realize itself. And I have the privilege of witnessing it, and I want to be able to say, along with all the people sitting here, yeah, we were there, we were part of it, and we have to go along.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to hear from you. And I didn't want to say one last word about Drisha. You know, we started 3 summers ago. This will be the 3rd summer. We started actually programming in Israel, up north, in a place called Renewal. And a lot of what Dani was talking about, actually, we witnessed there in terms of our program, which is those people that will be in Israel in the first half of August are welcome to come visit, and you'll see exactly what Dani described. A lot of that actually is taking place in our program in terms of the voice of the Mizrahi. One of our key teachers is a Sephardic, very wonderful person, a Sephardic Jew who was centrally involved, one of our leading people in Israel. Obviously the women, it's a program which men and women are learning together in more different places. People haven't learned before, people coming out of the yeshivot. It's totally open, and it's a different, many of the people that I mentioned, Shai Zarki was with us last summer. There really is amazing things happening on the ground, and thank you very much for bringing it to our attention, to reminding us, and especially that, I remember Rabbi Soloveitchik wrote an essay called Kol Dodido Fake. You know, Shir HaShirim, that we, Shir HaShirim, the lover knocks at the door, but the woman, who's actually the key person in this particular unusual book, is already tired, they can't get up, and by the time she realizes, gets to the door, it's too late. And, you know, one of our challenges, I think, is exactly as Dani mentioned at the end, really to appreciate something when it's happening, to be able to get the insight into what's really important, what is secondary. Sometimes the big things that are happening very quietly, and we have to be very attentive to hear the voice, to see what we should be seeing, and then to spring into action, really to seize the moment, to be part of this renewal, part of the growth. And as Dani said, not just to strengthen the Jews over there, our sisters and brothers in Israel, what happens there is happening here. We're all one people, we're all so deeply connected, and to remind ourselves always of the opportunities that we have, and to strengthen all our connections. So thank you very much. And we're very glad to be part of a bigger program on the West Side. I don't know what else is on the agenda today, but thank you for coming.